The keynote this morning is with Wesley Connor, the global head of L&D at Randstad. And as you'll see, he's a master facilitator and certified leadership team and executive coach. He has over 3,000 hours of transformational coaching under his belt and 5,000 hours of in-class facilitation. He's helped to shape the human capital strategy for small, medium, and large businesses, touching the lives of over 45,000 employees globally. He's also supported multiple change management initiatives and most recently helped to successfully navigate the digital transformation of a big global organization. You'll see he's passionate about mentorship and the proud creator, of a best-in-class, multi-award-winning mentorship program that connects employees to 32 different countries. And he's going to be doing a case study for us today, talking about learning disrupted. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Wesley Connor. Wes, go ahead, take it away.
Great, thanks, Bob. Pleasure to be here with all of you. I was thinking yesterday when I was attending the sessions, I usually attend around 3 or 4 of these events. I think it's very important for me personally, for my professional development, but also I learned so much connecting with all of you during these sessions. So I'm really looking forward to the day that we can get back in person and sort of have that peer learning. Great, I'm going to share my screen as presentation. Great. Just want to confirm, Bobby, that you can both hear me and you can see the presentation.
All is good. I can hear you and I can see your screen.
Excellent. Thanks. I thought today I would bring forward a case study because I know that when I attend these conferences, I love a case study to know a little more tactical details around how organizations are navigating learning in their companies. So I want to present a case study today around learning disrupted and what happened at Randstad when the pandemic happened and we had to move our entire learning strategy, the in-person portion, to a virtual platform. So I want to spend just a few minutes giving you some context on the program and why it was such a battle to be able to bring this to a virtual format. So first of all, for those of you who don't know Randstad, we are the largest provider of human capital on the planet, and we're proud of it. But much like any other industry or company at the moment, we're facing quite a few complexities that we're trying to future-proof our organization from. So the first one really is digitization, right? We know that industries that are going to thrive in the future are already doing the work now towards digitizing their organization. And even more so with the pandemic, this has been accelerated. So we are in the process globally of digitizing our business. And from a learning perspective, a huge part learning is playing as far as the change management. Because as I learned a few days ago, which I loved, is that technology is easy, change is not. The other thing is disruption from smaller business models who are a lot more agile, who can move quicker with new business models. And as they say, you know, it's not necessarily the large fish that wins, it's the fastest fish. So while we're looking at disruption, we're looking at how can we restructure from an organizational perspective to ensure that we don't have the layers of bureaucracy, that we have collaboration, we break down the silos so that we can move at a quick pace to be able to pivot our business strategy as needed. The next one is commoditization. We're in an industry that's being commoditized, and in order for us to continue to compete, to stay relevant, we have to continue to elevate our value proposition. And we don't have a product. What we sell is a service. We work in human capital. So this really is our ability to have value-driven conversations and bring more of that consultative skills. The next is globalization. We are in 39 countries. We are a large matrixed organization. And much to the point of disruption and being agile enough to move, we have to ensure that we break down the silos, that we start to have more global systems, communication, and also collaboration. And then finally, and perhaps more importantly, what are the evolving competencies, the evolving skills that are going to set us up to thrive in the future? We know, because of course we're experts in human capital, that the skills and the competencies that made an organization successful in the past are not the skills that are needed to be able to move an organization forward. So we've been doing a really robust exercise in workforce planning and asking ourselves, what are the competencies and the skills that are needed? This is all done, by the way, before the pandemic. So you can imagine that now that we have been able to pivot and move to meet the disruption of the pandemic, new skills are emerging. So the question was, does this matter? And we did some research to find out that 80% of CEOs, I believe the stat I heard yesterday was 8 out of 10, believe that now this idea of upskilling and reskilling their organization is their biggest business challenge that they're facing. And then I saw that stat yesterday that only 20% of employees believe that they have the skills or competencies to be successful in the future. So the question for us as an executive team was, do we buy or do we build? Do we go out and recruit and infuse a bunch of knowledge and expertise in our organization, or do we look at what we have and start to upskill and reskill? When we did the research, we found that actually it's a lot more effective to be able to upskill and reskill a current organization. And I think the stat that we presented to our executive board was around this fact that it could cost you 6 times more to hire from without the organization than to look from within and to upskill and reskill. So with that, we were committed to upskilling our current workforce. The next question was, well, what do we need to upskill or reskill them in? What are the competencies that we know we're going to need to thrive in the future? When we did this exercise, we looked at what other organizations are spending as far as upskilling and reskilling to be able to measure, are we doing enough, right? And when we look right now, there are very aggressive plays to be able to reskill workforces. We know that AT&T has committed $1 billion in upskilling their workforce. Amazon announced 700 million. That's $7,000 an employee. Accenture, 200 million. PwC, quite aggressive with a $3 billion upskilling strategy. And then when we looked at the Fortune 500 companies, we saw that there was an average of 1,200 to 1,400 US in training per employee. And that's up from 900 in 2018. So you can see a clear trend that organizations are really looking at upskilling and reskilling as a business priority. Interesting for you on the call to be able, because we're all in learning, to be able to think of your organization and where do you stand along these benchmarks. It's roughly around 1 to 4% of total PE spend. I'd say as far as 5 for the organizations who are really aggressively upskilling and reskilling. So where were we? We decided that we needed to be a little more aggressive if we were going to stay competitive. So we actually made a plan to invest quite a bit in 2021 in upskilling and reskilling. Our workforce planning exercise showed us that there were 3 key areas that we needed to upskill all of our people in. The first, in order to continue to compete in a commoditized industry and to raise our value proposition, we need to further equip our sales teams globally to be able to thrive in a more complex selling environment. And also we need to be able to give our recruiters more talent advisory skills. So again, they could drive those value-driven conversations. The next is, as the largest provider of human capital, and maybe like many of you on the call, one of our benefits is that we have a tremendous amount of data, but it's only as powerful, we've discovered, in our people's ability to be able to use that data and drive meaningful, insightful, opportunities for businesses. So we wanted to have a really aggressive play around data and digital fluency, that everyone in the organization had an understanding of the types of data that we have, that we can use, and how to position it, both visually through storytelling, in order to, as we say, make data matter. The third was around transformational leadership. How do we equip our leaders and individuals to step into their own personal leadership to be able to navigate all the disruption and the digitization of our industry? So we had our 3 pillars. We had a huge investment from our executive board. We are off to the races. I'm going to focus on the sales and talent advisory skills for the purpose of this webinar, because it's the one that was most impacted by the pandemic and having to go virtual. So when we looked at a sales methodology, I had come into the role for the first time, so we didn't have a centralized global learning function. And one of our objectives was to unify our sales culture globally with one common language, one methodology, and to also to be able to unite our sales and marketing teams together. We went to RFP, we looked at a bunch of different theories, different methodologies. We, in the end, chose to go with the Challenger sale training. And by no means, I do not work for Challenger. So I just want to put that out there. And I encourage anyone to do the needs analysis for your business and figure out what's needed. It just so happened Challenger was a very good fit for us. It had excellent results in similar type industries. It addressed our need for data fluency. It was really focused on complex B2B type sales. So with that, we decided to do a pilot in early 2019 using a Challenger workshop. It was a 2-day in-person workshop. We did it in Clearwater, Florida, and we brought across stakeholders globally to attend this workshop. After that in-person session, we're still in person at this point, we waited 4 to 6 months to be able to measure some ROI. And we saw a really significant increase in revenue that had been attributed to that 2-day workshop. I won't get too much into how we measured it unless it comes up in the Q&A, but we did use Salesforce to be able to look at revenue growth for targeted accounts. The feedback was fantastic. We had 98% of our participants say that yes, they were able to actually use these skills to have more meaningful, value-driven conversations with our clients. And 86% of the respondents reported that they were able to now take data and help reframe business challenges and opportunities. So those were 2 main boxes that we had checked. With that ROI, with the EB investment, we are off to the races, right? We have 2 certified Challenger facilitators, a rock star, often EMEA, Megan Hughes, and myself, and we were going on a world tour. We were going to do these 2-day in-person, really aggressive upskilling strategy across the world. That was in January. And then we started to hear the trickling of, I was supposed to go to Australia and had been canceled. There was concerns about that. Hadn't quite reached North America, EMEA yet. And then of course, it happened all very quickly. And all of a sudden we found ourselves in a learning disrupted, right? We couldn't travel anywhere. The pandemic had completely hauled all of our upskilling and reskilling strategy in this area. This was quite a shock. And to be honest, there was a bit of time when we thought, what do we do, right? Do we wait this out? How long do we think in-person training is going to be on, on delay for? And also really longing for, we love this in-person training. We can't even fathom how we could be able to do this virtually. At this point, we brought the team together and said, let's really choose an empowered state here. Are we going to go with a fixed mindset, which is really around longing for the way things used to be? As a facilitator, I love the human in-person connection, and I found myself really resistant to going virtual and trying new things. Or we said, is this actually an opportunity to grow ourselves professionally, but also to look at what are the benefits of going virtual and how could we challenge ourselves to make this program even better? I'm happy to say we empowered a growth mindset and we did it very quickly. This was along with a campaign we had launched globally in our organization called #NewWays, which was trying to feed some inspiration and gather ideas globally on how we could quickly pivot and how we could even do better in this virtual environment. With that, with some inspiration, with a lot of research, we were able to turn that in-person strategy into a virtual program in around 3 weeks. It was a very quick turnaround. And we did a first pilot of this virtual program in our UK OPCO. So we've now made some tweaks as we've gone along, and I want to present what this program now looks like in a virtual format. So as I mentioned before, it was a 2-day, very intensive, immersive experience. And now that it's virtual, we've been able to ask ourselves that question, and it's based on this Gartner research of without any reinforcement, 87% of learning is lost within 30 days. And we tend to use this to scare executives at the board table, right? For investment in reinforcement and sustainment. And we believed if we were able to take this program virtual, that we could actually move the needle on that 87%. So what we have now is a 7-week virtual program as opposed to 2 days. Because one of the things we found is that it is a lot of information to take in 2 days and very challenging to ask someone to completely change in their paradigms around sales in a 2-day session. So we found a lot of success in bite size. We break it up into 2 live, we call it virtual classroom sessions. I think if you get a webinar coming in your calendar, you assume that you're going to be attending and watching. So we like to set the expectation that it's going to be interactive. Sometimes we call it a workshop. We divided it into the core competencies so that we could actually focus on a competency and then we could measure it. Did they get it before we move on to the next competency? As a learning team, I have to admit, I had to quickly upskill myself and had a fantastic team who also brought lots of innovative ideas on how we could leverage technology. So there is absolutely a technology piece that I think as learning professionals now, we have to be equally interested in technology as we are in learning. So we leverage Zoom as our platform. We needed breakout room functionality. We like Mentimeter and Jamboards and Kahoots, and we've tried piloting lots of different innovative and interactive technology. We saw it as an opportunity to integrate this training with our opportunity and account management technology. Now, again, I don't work for Altify, but we do use Altify. It sits on top of Salesforce, and we've been able to customize that technology to this Challenger methodology so that you don't just go through a program, you learn the competencies, and then it's constantly being reinforced and sustained in the tool that you're working in daily. We were able to identify, because now you don't have in person, you don't have the costs. We were able to identify what we call challenger champions. They were people, senior executives, people who had really mastered the competencies, who could now be a global ambassador group, who could be guest hosts in the sessions. They could sit on some panels when we have people present, and they could also support us with some breakout room facilitation, because of course, we're just two people. It's impossible to give tailored feedback in each breakout room unless you leverage some expertise in the organization. Virtual communities was essential to give that feeling of connection. So we have communities for each group going through that we ask them to post homework, post videos to give feedback to each other. Real life application. This perhaps was the most powerful part. In 2 days, it's very difficult to apply. However, in the virtual environment, we were able to break it up into competencies and then give them a challenge to actually go apply that in their real life and come back and sort of flip the classroom. A lot of things are learned through the actual doing of it and sharing of lessons learned. Improved measurement, because it's a longer process, we're able to break down the ROI a little more concretely. Sales and reinforcement. So now we're, again, don't work for Centrical, but we have chosen Centrical as a gamification app that we're using to help sustain and reinforce this during the session we're looking into, but definitely for the months that follow the program. We have launched also an entire reinforcement campaign. So globally, we have Chalk Talks, which our executives take a topic for the month and put out thought leadership. We have open mics where salespeople can come and get feedback on things they're working from. We have Test and Improves, which are more formal account review processes using that Altify tool. So we've sort of been able to transform the entire organization in this virtual environment. I'm aware of time, so I'm gonna skip really quickly to some of the lessons that we learned when we were going through this process in a virtual environment. I think the first one is not to forget that learning is an experience. It's not an event, right? So think of when you used to come in person, you got an invitation. Usually you felt special that you were chosen in the organization to be invested in. You usually got there was a reception. So I'm very conscious about how are people being invited to this session? Is there some sort of executive acknowledgement that they've been invited? We thought about sending, who doesn't love treats in the training session? Don't you miss it, right? Why not send the participants a bag of treats that they can have during this virtual session? One of the things that people love the most is connecting with each other when they come together in person. Why not create virtual lunches or virtual coffees that you can help people connect and give them that sort of in-person experience that we all miss? Stop thinking of time and start thinking of engagement, right? I laugh when I hear people say, well, should it be, what's the perfect virtual time? Should it be 20? Should it be 30? And my thing is, I love The Crown right now. I don't know if anyone else is watching on Netflix. I've never heard anyone who also loves The Crown say, you know what, that episode was amazing, but I think it was too long. No, and it's because the content is engaging. So I ask myself, for how long is this content engaging? And that's the time of your webinar. If you have 28 minutes of engaging content, you have a 28-minute webinar instead of trying to fill time with content. Participation interactions are key. I say that people are like monitors, they go dead after 5 seconds. So that's why we really had to leverage all the technology to keep them interactive. New roles. So now we're looking at new roles. Like, who would have thought story editors, directors, production assistants to be able to attend the webinars? We're thinking of what are the talents we need on our learning and development team, in a completely different way. Flexible learning journeys. This was huge for me because I'm a bit of a stickler, right? So if you say, the session, you can only miss 2 webinars, or if you're late, and we had all these rules, and we realized it simply doesn't work, especially not in a pandemic when we're dealing with families, multiple priorities. We're in a very, very fast-paced sales environment. So we said, instead of them changing their ways, we need to adapt to meet them where they are. So we've created ways that all the learning journeys can be flexible. And also there's an opportunity to attend in person. So you have, virtual live sessions. So you do have that flexibility if you need it. We flip the classroom as much as we can. We give them beforehand so that they learn a concept, and the sessions are more about interaction and application. Virtual facilitation style, I say that now because of Netflix and TV is our competition. The virtual facilitation style, people are expecting like Ellen DeGeneres. I mean, there is a certain style to virtual facilitation that we need to upskill our learning and development professionals in. Creating virtual opportunities for those social learning opportunities. So again, communities are great. We found a lot of success with giving group assignments. So giving a team something to work on and come back and present gives them the opportunity to connect with colleagues globally and also start to learn from different perspectives and parts of the business. And then finally, less theory, more application, especially in a virtual environment and at the pace that we're working at. We found that the more practical applications we can give, the better. So those are my lessons learned. I think there's around 5 minutes left. I'm just going to confirm with you, Bob, because if so, I'm going to move to question and answer.
Actually, you've still got a little bit more time. Your schedule.
Oh, great.
7:35, so you got 10 minutes left if you want to.
Excellent.
Bit more.
Nice. So then I'm going to go over my best practices. Okay, let's do it. Some best practices that I've learned. We have tried numerous different sizes of classes in these virtual environments. What we found is that 12 to 20 works best because you can have that level of interaction. As a facilitator, I find it very hard to track and engage more than 20 people in one session. So that can be a pushback with the executive team because of course they want to put all 45,000 employees through a program at once. And I think it's really up to us as learning professionals to step into that consultant role and say, here's why that's not going to work and what we're thinking. So we have had to build a business case around that in the past. And I'm happy to say that we've seen much better results with it. The only thing for me that you should be mandating in development programs is cameras on. We're lucky in that large part of our business was virtual to begin with, and we had a cameras on culture, but that's not necessarily the case in all companies. It is essential that if we're moving virtual in these types of programs where we're looking at soft skills and competencies, that we're able to connect face to face. We know that 80% of the information we take in is visual. From a facilitation perspective, are you engaged? I need to see you, and other people need to see other humans. What I have found is that there needs to be an enrollment process in this because some people, and especially certain generations, are so image conscious. They're used to being judged, right? Did I get a heart? Did I get a like? So the thought of being on camera for an hour webinar without the ability to control it can actually be very unnerving to people. So I enroll them in the very first session on why we're going to have cameras on, that we want to be able to connect, we want to be able to see you, and sort of lay that as a foundation. That being said, it's the only thing we mandate. I think if you've mandated development training in your organization, you need to step back and say, at what point didn't we do the work to get the buy-in, to get the excitement, so that people are self-selecting to develop themselves? Upskill participants in essential technology. This was another mistake we made. We assumed everyone knows how to use Zoom. We assumed everyone knows how to use Kahoots. And what we discovered is that people don't. And you'd be surprised, it's not a generational thing. We had some younger generations who struggled with technology. So now to support us in that, we have a pre-program webinar that is around how to use and how to navigate all the technology that's going to be leveraged in the program. And we found this just leads to a lot smoother transition into the program and more interaction in the session. Leverage breakout rooms, because that connection and interaction piece is so key. We have had great success with leveraging breakout rooms. And my key is around 4 to 5 people in a breakout room seems to be the magic number for us in our organization. Leverage the larger community to start a movement. We realize that we do have quite a bit of resources being a global company, but we don't have enough to upskill and reskill the entire organization, nor should all learning be coming from the learning team, right? We want to start a learning culture. So we've had some virtual programs that we've been able to identify and train the trainers and put people who are actually doing the job to facilitate the programs virtually. And what we found is that it's a great stretch assignment for them. They're able to build other competencies and they're far more engaged in their role because they're taking on something new and something exciting. Validate learning at every step, which was an advantage of going virtual. Now we have checkpoints, right? So whether it's an assignment that's validated by an expert, whether it's a quiz or an assessment, we're able to now clearly say, yes, everyone who has gone through this program has a demonstrated ability for these competencies and behaviors. Establish peer accountability. We found great success with having people take assignments and then come back and present to the larger group. I think I mentioned that we leveraged some of our executives to be able to come in and give panel feedback. That's pressure in a way really helps drive motivation. It also gives them an opportunity to be exposed to more senior stakeholders in the organization. Measure results are absolutely key. We have a mandate that any program we do has to be able to be, we have to be able to measure both the business impact and the behavioral impact. And then we found that it's key to report it back to the business. What are the results that we're seeing? And then finally, keep it fun, right? Certainly no one likes to be bored. We want to be excited to come into learning and development. I always say to my team that we should be like the grandparents. I don't take operational compliance training as a learning function, because I want, when that email comes through from learning and development, that you're excited about it. You know it's going to be an engaging opportunity. So by all means, find ways to keep it fun, whether you do, some sessions where it's a costume session, whether you find interesting ways. We've done virtual bingo and things like that to ensure that when they come to the session, they're engaged. Great. So that brings me to the end of the formal presentation. And now I'd love to know if you have any questions that I can help clarify.
Yeah, we do have a few questions for you, Wes. Yeah, your camera's on, pajamas off policy there. Is that was that really well received? I know some people kind of like that virtual remote working environment because of the informal nature of it. Did you get any pushback at all on that?
As I mentioned, a large part of our business was already virtual, and we already had a cameras on mandate, so we didn't have that much pushback on it. So no, for us, it wasn't that much of a challenge. But I will say, because I was part of implementing the cameras on mandate at the beginning, and it really is around that piece of enrollment. Why are we going to use cameras? And then also being specific for what meetings are you required. So in a learning, environment, we say, because you can't choose to bring your face to a live training, but there might be some meetings where a camera is not necessary.
All right, and keeping in mind that we've got several different industry verticals as far as folks attending today, who in the organization, I guess, seniority-wise, should be involved in the decision-making for such a huge pivot like the one that you had to make? Is it something that you kind of go through with your team and then take up to the C-suite, or are they involved right out of the gate?
I must say that I'm very fortunate to work for an organization that sees learning as a strategic objective. So there was no disconnection between my role being in the global learning function and the C-suite. It was made in conjunction. So this was created in parallel with all senior stakeholders. So I would say that it can't be created below and then brought up, because it really has to be so tied to the business strategy.
Okay, in regards to the challenger champions that you mentioned a few times, I'm not sure if you went over this or not, but who selected them, or how did you go about selecting them?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, this initiative was launched by our chief sales officer, not learning and development, and we've tried to be in the back so that this is really seen as a business initiative. So a lot of our stakeholders and challenger ambassadors have been identified by our CSO, Pat McCall, because he's able to see who's really excelling in these competencies. And then going through the program, and as facilitators, we're able to see who's really great at these competencies that we can take and give some additional support and training to, who could then become, breakout room facilitators or panelists for our sessions.
All right, and you mentioned several times about the technologies that were utilized and the importance of them. How many pilots would you think that you went through before you kind of made a choice on that? I mean, is there any recommendation, or when you finally saw the one that you wanted, did you just end everything right there? How did you go about doing that?
My advice is, and I understand for those working in a large organization, that sometimes there can be a lot of red tape, and so it takes a lot of time to get things done. I'm hoping during this pandemic that a lot of the red tape has been removed, which is what we're finding. And my advice is to experiment fast fail fast, but if it works, scale quickly. So we tried a bunch of things very quickly. We thought, we're in the middle of this program, who cares? Let's try Kahoots. Let's try this. And if people liked it, okay, great. Let's scale it really quickly.
Nice. All right. So, as far as the interaction that you kind of encourage, what are some of the strategies that you utilized for getting and maintaining the interaction, which is so critical for virtual?
Yeah, great question. So we've really leveraged communities. We're a G Suite globally, so we've leveraged Google communities, and each class has their own community. And we are constantly giving them assignments that will drive them to that community to either post an answer to a question or to comment on someone else's. We have them work as a group on one project throughout the entire program, which is really beneficial because then they go to the community to be able to communicate with each other. So I would say that that's been key. You have to have a platform that people can meet on, and then it has to be integrated into the program so that it's not seen as something outside of the program, but it's seen as a natural process of going through.
Agreed. So this question actually came up yesterday, and I wanted to run it by you. As far as what you saw, particularly with such a diverse and global audience that you had to have, do you think, or did you see any particular generations? I'm not trying to single out the older ones, but did you see any generations struggling with the virtual learning?
Um, no. And I say that because I went in with that stereotype in my head, and then now with this pandemic, I'm seeing my father who's 75. He's like he's using Twitter. He calls it tweets. So I think that people are able to really quickly adapt the technology. And I've seen people of all generations be equally terrified as technology, and I've seen people at older generations be very tech savvy. So I don't like to stereotype anyone, and I don't like to assume that anyone's also very good at it.
That's the response we got yesterday, and I have to admit that I kind of had a preconceived notion about that as well. Maybe it's because of my own struggles with it, but it's good to hear that
Yeah.
that it went over so smoothly. So I think we'll kind of wrap it up with the final question here, broad-based question. What do you think will be the role of learning in the post-COVID world?
Yeah, I think learning is going to change quite a bit, and we're seeing it already with the immediate disruption. There's no longer time to go do a 3-month need analysis and then come back with recommendations and build a big formal program. It really doesn't work. I mean, we were developing support and within days to be able to help people navigate, and I think that trend is going to continue. I also think from a reskilling and upskilling perspective that we're going to see huge shifts in the D&I aspect, much like how now Google has created some internal certifications through Udemy that will be internally recognized as legitimate degrees. So I think that you're going to see organizations take back a lot of that upskilling and reskilling through education and create a lot more of those type certification programs.
Okay, yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks, Wes. A great case study there about how you converted the entire in-person sales training into a virtual experience in just 3 weeks. Nothing short of amazing there. Really appreciated the insight into some of the pitfalls too to avoid when moving to a virtual learning environment. So again, want to take this opportunity on behalf of everybody from Opal Group as well as the audience. Thanks so much for joining us again, Wes.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And please feel free to reach out with any questions. I'd love to connect.
Will do.